And it's time for more image critiques on Behind the Shot. Hi, once again. Welcome back to Behind the Shot. I'm Steve Brazill, and this is our image critique series. I want to remind you before we get started that, as always, you can find all the information on the Behind the Shot podcast at behindtheshot.tv. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if wherever you get your podcasts, video is supported, there is both an audio and a video feed. And of course, we're on YouTube at Behind the Shot as well. This series, the image critique series, only available on the Behind the Shot YouTube channel, not in the normal podcast feed. And I want to welcome my guest, as always, Don Komarechka of the Photo Geek Weekly podcast. How are you, buddy?
I am wonderful, Steve. Welcome to 2020.
Yeah, welcome to 2020. Happy New Year and happy holidays to you. Nice to have you join me again today. We were talking about him looking like a ghost earlier because his camera was really bright, and we've got that straightened out. So I want to change the way that you and I have done this show a little bit. Last time we did the introductions and all of that at the beginning. This time, I just want to get straight into the show. But Don, I want you, if you would, tell people how they can get involved in the critique series.
We have a Flickr group, so the links to that will be in the show notes, or if you just type in Behind the Shot, I'm sure you'll be able to track us down within Flickr, and then put in a hashtag BTS critique, or it's not a hashtag, Flickr doesn't use them, they just call them tags. BTS critique is what we look for. Anything that's in that group that has that tag, we can peruse, and we'll choose, at least this week, maybe around 10 or 12 images to get through as quickly as we can to try to be as succinct as possible. That's a goal that we have. We haven't been able to hit that yet. Let's hope we can do that this week.
Yeah, it's a work in progress as far as getting through this and getting through it, timing the critiques, and also getting the information that you guys need to get better. I do want to remind you of one thing before we get into image number one, and that is whatever image we happen to be looking at, even if it is not your genre, you can learn from it. Right? If you're a landscape photographer and we're talking about a portrait or vice versa, you can still learn from it. Lighting matters, composition matters. And so just be aware, whatever we're talking about, make sure that you hang around and check out every single image. So Don, let's go to image number one. This image is called Autumn in the Park, and I'll have you take it first.
All right. So a couple of things just off the top. I love the way that the trees interact with the sky. If this was processed in order to recover sky detail, you don't have any glowing edges on that. And that's something that you see oftentimes, especially with HDR processing. I don't see that here, so that's very good. But the composition, I think, lacks a central anchor point. You've got the buildings on the far side, but they're about as bright as the rocks on the shoreline, and they don't really stand out in any meaningful way. So I might play with some dodging and burning, making those rocks a little bit less obvious, and maybe the buildings stand out a little bit more. The people in the frame are so distant and so far away that they're inconsequential to the image. If you had somebody standing on the boardwalk at the very right side of the frame, gazing into the pond, that would be a useful person in the frame. But the positions of the people as they are right now, I'd almost want to clone them out. Or, this would be a fun idea, put a neutral density filter, a pretty heavy one, on your camera to make the water a bit smoother. It might look like frosted glass because there's a bit of a ripple. It might blur the clouds, which could also be useful and add some directionality into the image, but it would also blur the people and get rid of them in camera without you having to muck about in Photoshop to get rid of those people.
Wow. Okay, so I don't have anything to say now. That was you said exactly what I wanted. There's one thing I'll add. I do want to reiterate, I agree on the subject matter. It's a beautiful scene. It's a beautiful landscape scene, but there is no subject other than the scene as a whole. And in some point, that's landscape photography, but you still want an anchor point. And I didn't even think about that. A person standing on that little walkway on the right-hand side would just, in thought, or a couple. This would be a great scene for a wedding photo, for example. The one thing I want to add, though, is the picture isn't level. So either that or you're getting some distortion because the left tree is leaning in, but the buildings are leaning left. So check your lines, make sure things look realistically. I agree that people are just not a benefit here. And I think a slightly longer shutter speed. So this was shot at 800th of a second at f4. I would change that. Do a longer shutter speed, get a little movement in those clouds, I think would tighten it up.
I know from my own personal experience that the Canon EF 24-105 f4L lens, which I used for many years, is not the sharpest wide open. Bring that down to
It's
f8.
not. Well, the new version is. The new version is
this
sharp.
is the first one.
Right.
And so just bring that down to f5.6 or f8, and you'll improve your results anyhow. It won't increase your depth of field in the frame. Just if you're pixel peeping, it might help you put a little pat on your back.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Image number 2, I'll go ahead and take. This one does not have a title, but this is just a fascinating image to me. And when I was looking through the pool over at Flickr, when I pulled this one up, it immediately drew my eye. So to the maker of the shot, great job at creating an image that makes me go, what's happening, right? This is more photojournalistic as opposed to a staged photo, and I like that. This, by the way, was shot with a Canon EOS R with the 24-105 as well. And I just got to say, he is tack sharp. This is the exposure on this, the everything about how it is technically done is absolutely beautiful. The lighting is nice. I looked at this. Here's another thing with portraits that you'll generally want to think about. Look at his eyes. So you've got whites on the left of his irises, but you can also see whites on the right of his irises. It's not touching the corner of his eyes. And that always makes a portrait a little easier to look at and a little more comfortable, a little more flattering. I am dying to know what he's looking at. I'm dying to know what he's thinking, almost too much. I want to know so bad that it actually kind of frustrates me of what is the story? I know the subject. I don't know the story. Here's where this image to me could be radically improved, and that is composition. I like where he's at in the frame. I don't even mind where she's at in the frame. But right to the left of his head is one of those machines. I'm guessing this is like a cow milking station or something like that. I don't know. But there's a cable hanging down with a silver hook on it. And then a silver ring at the bottom of that hook that lines up right to her glasses. And it's distracting. And I tried zooming in to see, is it literally over her glasses? Maybe it is. Maybe she's looking through something. It feels like it's behind her on his plane.
Yeah, it is. If that's based on the focus.
Say again?
Based on the focus, and you can see where it's starting and where the focal plane is, it is behind her head.
See, and that's what I think as well. And that's a problem for me. It should not be intersecting her. So if you were to rotate a little bit more to the left, you could get some separation between that and her face. And I think it would make it stronger. You'd have to adjust probably some other things compositionally. There is somebody in the back with a white shirt and a longer shirt is what that looks like. On the top right corner, I'd maybe bring that white down a little bit as well. But other than that, nice image.
I don't think that is actually a person in that upper right-hand corner. It looks like a piece of clothing, but I don't see a hand coming out of a sleeve or anything like that. Point.
Maybe it's
I don't see legs. So it could be just a shirt on a hanger. But regardless of what it is, it's immaterial to the image itself. And so, I mean, that's when you play... Well, or you crop it out. You play Border Patrol. You look around the edges of the frame, find things that don't match, and you can crop that out without completely destroying the image. Or even Content Aware Fill would probably do a pretty good job in that location as well.
Agreed. All right. So let's go to image number 3, and this one is called He Lives in the Shadows. Take it away.
All right. So I love the art before the photograph. I mean, so you've got this guy that I don't know if it's blood or oil or something, but he's dirty and he looks like a bad actor kind of thing. And it just has a great expression from the person in the photograph as well. So there's a lot of stuff that went on before the photo was taken to get in the right mindset and to set up the shot properly. And cigarette in the mouth that has been lit before and has been like saved away, tucked away, and is about to be relit.
Which isn't that part? I'm sorry to interrupt, but isn't that really part of the killer part of this image?
Yeah, because that is part of the grunge. It's not a brand new cigarette. It's something that has been used and almost to the point of completion. But now, you're getting the most out of that. And I think that sets the character, the scene and the motivation here. One thing that I don't see, and I'm on the fence of whether or not I like it, is I don't see even the tiniest glimmer of a catchlight in the eye. Now, Without that, that also sets part of the mood. With it, it might be a visual anchor to see where exactly he might be looking. I don't know if he's looking down, if he's looking off to the right, because his eye is completely black. We can't see anything within there. But I do like the way the lighting is casting across the face. So to define that in any different way, it might change the whole meaning of everything. There's been a vignette applied to the image. You can tell in the bottom right-hand corner, it kind of fades off. It darkens down in a way that doesn't coincide with the lighting of the particular scene. And that's fine too. And then the fact that it was applied sort of in just one region of the frame and not anywhere else. Like you can see the cuff or his... not his cuff, but his along his shoulder line, you've got the ridge of his jacket, that being nice and bright and sharp, hitting the edge of the frame. I like it. There's a lot to like here. What would I improve? I don't really know. Maybe burn down the nose a little bit. It's a bit too bright, but I really like the shot.
Yeah, I love this image, and I'm so happy that you picked up on that cigarette, because that to me said, and again, I don't know if it's, what it is, if it's grease or oil or what, but I picture this guy working on an oil rig, and he's been working, takes a cigarette break, couple of puffs, puts it out, puts it in his pocket, goes to work, comes back and finishes it later, right? This is what I was talking about on the last one, by the way. I want to know the story. This one I can interpret myself even if I'm wrong. There's still mystery, but I at least can fill in some blanks so I'm not left uncomfortable with it. The lighting is spot on, except the edge of the nostril is too bright. Bring that down. The hand lighting, everything about it. Even how you captured where the flame intersects with the cigarette, right? At the edge of the cigarette. It really, really well done. Now, a couple things. One, I want to give you props to the maker for your posing. Your hand position here, the position of the thumb on the lighter, the left hand, the way the fingers are together, everything about that is very comfortable, looks natural, isn't distracting. The catch light, though, is an issue for me. I would not want you to rotate the light around to get more of a catch light in his eye, because I love the lighting on the side of the face. But nothing says that you can't Photoshop a little catch light in there, right?
Yeah.
Just add it in, because other than that, really seriously, just fantastic, fantastic image. All right, let's go to the next one, unless you got something else.
No, let's keep it going.
Okay. So this one is called Road America Harley Madness. And this image, when I first pulled it up, just leaped at me. I need to see this big, right? First of all, it's a super wide pano. Brilliant idea on the super wide pano. If you had included much more of the sky, which appears to be gray and hazy, it would not have done anything for me whatsoever, and it would not have added to the image. However, in front of the bikes, I think you made a mistake by cropping out as much as you did. And if you did add it to the bottom, I'd probably add some to the top to balance it, because I do like them dead center in this frame. I do think that actually works for this composition. The reason I'm not happy with the crop at the bottom is the cone. So I've got the two cones on the right-hand side in the grass. I don't like that I'm seeing half a cone, because there isn't that much below it, right? Just give me the rest of the cone to give me an idea of perspective of the road and the cones coming forward. I like that I've got the timer sign in the background. And by the way, this was shot at 500 millimeters on a Canon 7D. This is a tough shot, and it's really, really well executed. I'm also fascinated that you chose f/18 at 1/800th of a second ISO 2000. And here's why. The one thing that's bothering me in this image is I just need something sharp. The cones are sharp. I understand the heat blur. I understand that these motorcycles are moving. I get all of that. But I really wish that at least one of the number plates was tacked sharp, or a helmet was tacked sharp. Something to anchor me. I have the feeling that may have been an artistic choice by the photographer to have the whole thing kind of soft and blurry for motion. But for me as a viewer, I think it would be a stronger image if there was some sharpness in this. I think the sharpest number is probably 77. But other than that, I love your thought process in this.
The only way to improve this, Steve, would be to have them closer, because everything that's not sharp is because of heat distortion. Take a look at the center frame number 45, and then just to the right of that, I think it's 176 versus 176. Versus the sign in behind. And so you can see how drastically the heat distortion is affecting things. There's a lot of compression here at 500 millimeters.
Yep.
And so you would have to have the entire group of racers much closer to the camera to mitigate that. And I don't think you would have the same feel. So
you don't think that they could have gotten those sharp? I mean, again, I mentioned at the beginning that there's clear heat cloud going on here, but you don't think they could have gotten some of those sharp?
Nope. No, not at that distance. We don't know how much has been cropped in on this, so we don't know exactly how far away they are. But judging by the massive amounts of heat distortion that aren't affecting the cones, but are affecting the numbers and everything further back, I think that's just the nature of the beast here.
Well, okay. Yeah. Well, again, I'm saying it's a super strong image. I love it. I just do wish as a viewer that was the case. And whoever made it, throw a note in the comment section below the video, because I'd be curious how far away you were. That would be fascinating.
I'd like to know that. But
anything else you want to add on this one?
It's one of those shots where they could be coming around multiple turns and you don't know how many times you get the chance to make this photograph. If there was the potential to have cones in different places or no cones at all, or some leading line that connected everything together in some way around some curve, I would spend some time just walking around the track. If you have different locations where you could have been taking this picture, having a leading line to bring you into the frame might be helpful, but I still like it as it is. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah. Again, the impact of this image is intense. Oh, and one thing, if you're shooting this at 500 millimeters and it's this kind of a race, my guess is that you're in a designated press area. So I understand you may not be able to move somewhere else. All right, so let's go to the next image. This one is called Comp Gen 1. Take it away.
Well, you could use a little bit more flair with the name, but I get that it's a composite, so at least there's that. I love the idea of having somebody sitting on some shoelaces. One of the things that it's an immediate tell for me when things have been composited together is that there is a detail discrepancy from one image to the other. And in this case, the man sitting looking at his phone wearing a Polaroid shirt is sharper than the areas around him, presumably because he was shrunk down and has now more detail compared to the detail that we're seeing on the... And I'm not talking about focus differences. I'm talking that he just appears sharper than the rest of the image. The solution for that, just apply a little bit of Gaussian blur or whatever you want to do to soften him up.
You could actually just add noise even, and it would create a similar effect to what you need.
Just something that helps connect those pieces together a little bit better. I can see that there was some attempt right below his feet to change the color of the wood in order to maybe approximate a shadow. I don't think that might have been done correctly either, because it looks like it's got a blue tone, which again, maybe he's wearing blue jeans. I understand that, but it doesn't match the exact same shadow profile as you see underneath the fronts of the two sneakers. So just a couple of little things on compositing together just to hit that point of realism. You know it's not real, but don't force your brain to find these things. Make it just suspend disbelief because you're not able to notice them, and just have fun with the scene.
I totally agree. I want to add a couple of things here. First of all, to the maker, really creative, and yeah, the name could have been better, but I understand this is probably you're learning or you're experimenting or you're playing, and that's awesome. I actually love your composition. The fact that you've got this pier type thing or whatever it is, leading line back to the center, but you left enough above it to give me a color variation at the rule of third, the top rule of third. I like that. It anchors everything down where the shoes are. I even like the way that your depth of field falls off slowly into the back to this nice buttery look. I think the highlights in the background could be brought down. My eye goes to those before they actually go to the shoes, because there are no highlights really on the shoes. So bring those down maybe a little bit, or add some highlights to the beat up white areas on the front of the Converse. I'm assuming they're Converse. They look like Converse. So let's talk about the composition a little bit. I totally agree with Don. My problem with the composition result is you cut him out okay. His edges are way too sharp. So if you zoom in and you look at the edges of the top of the sneakers where they blend into the background, which by the way are on the same plane as him, right? He's back where the little Converse logo would be at your ankle. So if they're soft, he should be soft. The shadow that Don pointed out, I just want to give you a tip because it's true. It's got a blue hue to it, but there's no blue hue to the shadow under the shoes. So clone the shadow from the shoes using a luminance setting only. Don't clone the wood pattern. Just clone that luminance so it matches basically where you are for the blur and the lightness. I do want to also hand you credit for the way that you opened the shoes and even had a little curl of the lace on the right. I don't know that any of that was intentional, but it adds to the realism that the shoes were just sitting there. So great idea. If it were me, I would do it again. And one last thing, I didn't notice this till Don said it. It's a Polaroid shirt. And that's actually, to me, a part of the brilliance of it.
There we go.
So,
all right, we should pick up the pace here, Steve, I think.
Yep, I think so. But first of all, before we do, just do me a favor really quick. Photo Geek Weekly podcast. Let me know what's happening with the Photo Geek Weekly podcast that Don Komarechka does. Anything you got coming up?
Well, we've got another episode coming up this week talking about CES 2020 announcements and everything that has been announced over that time period. There's some really fun technology that we are now or very soon going to be able to play with. And the possibilities are really endless for how we can adapt that photographically or in our general lives. So Photo Geek Weekly at photogeekweekly.com. Check that out. Steve, you are one of my favorite guests on that podcast. Always a pleasure to have a chat with you and totally geek out.
Thank you very much. I look forward. We're going to record that right after this. And I forgot to put the camera on you when I asked you to do that because I got so many things going on. So people have already seen this image, which is awesome. So let's jump into the next one. This one is called Ju-Jutsu. And there were a couple of Ju-Jutsu shots in the pool over at Flickr, tagged with btscritique. And I kind of debated because one of them was really cool with him laying on the ground looking at, I'm guessing, a ref or a timer or something like that. But then I saw this one. And I do martial arts myself. And this is, again, we're talking photojournalism here, right? So from a photojournalism point of view, to me, you're going to be limited what you can do in post-processing on this shot. So I'm going to take it from that point of view of, cropping, color correcting, dodging and burning. That's about it. No cloning or anything like that. So there's a couple of things that you did in this shot that are so well executed. Let's start with the back left corner, where it actually says the name of the event that's happening. You left the billboard in. So many people, notice that the two guys are centered almost. A lot of people would have tried to frame more to the right. They would have cropped from the left to get a rule of thirds, give a motion to fall into, a room to fall into. You left that sign up there, and I think that was absolutely wonderful. The other thing is the right-hand side of the frame. You didn't crop in the middle of a person on either side. I like that. You got clean cuts on both sides. You weighted them to where they have open area on the right, as opposed to where their feet are on the left. And the people in the background, the one guy's looking back over to watch it. You got his eyes tack sharp. The form, by the way, here looks really, really good. He's tack sharp, but the feet are blurry. So your choices on exposure were great. I am actually surprised you captured this at 1/160th of a second, by the way. Really well done. And at f4, 1000 ISO. I think it's well done. For improvement, there's just not a lot that I would do here other than one thing. The lights at the top actually don't add anything to me, nor does the duct, or the fact that because in the upper left, I can tell that your horizon line at the top isn't straight. There's something intersecting and dropping down into the frame on the left-hand side. I kind of wish that you just cropped below that light to clean up the scene. But other than that, I think it's really well done.
I wonder if you could still read the sign in the back if this was shot at f2.8 versus f4. The lens would have been capable to go one stop more open. That would have faded off the background a little bit more. And the only reason why I would want that is because you've got people, I can see one person like not looking, one person looking down at their phone, people not even facing the action. If everybody was glued to this motion and this movement, and this interaction between these two people, then the audience would be valuable. I don't think it's as valuable because nobody, well, not not nobody, but the majority of people in the background just don't appear to care about what's going on. And that's of no fault of the photographer. But if that's the case, de-emphasize them just a little bit if you can.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that one. All right, next one. This one is for Don to take. What do you got?
All right. A female Phidippus Regius jumping spider. That's also called a regal
And by
jumping
the way, the
spider.
reason I had you do this one first was because I didn't even want to attempt that.
The regal jumping spider is actually quite cool. We've got daring jumping spiders around here that are quite similar, and I've had the joy of photographing them before. Jumping spiders aren't for everybody. I mean, they are the clowns of the spider world. They're about the nicest spiders you could find. But this is done really well in a number of ways. Number one, it has a nice complementary foreground sort of scene, which looks like a dried dead leaf or something similar. The colors of the spider's little mouth parts, they accentuate within some of the same color palette there. The eyes, spider eyes, of which they have 8. You can see 4 in this frame right now. They don't have irises and pupils. They're just normally all black. So the way that you shape your light can kind of create an effect of that. And that's been done in this image as well. So very careful attention to lighting is important when you're lighting an image like this. You don't want to have too many harsh shadows. You want to have diffuse light, but you still want to bring out texture within the frame. So for macro lighting, when you're dealing with these kinds of insects, that diffusion is important. Now, 2 things that I would improve have to do with things just behind the spider. On the spider's right side, camera left, we see an area of the leaf that is a much brighter, almost golden kind of color. That doesn't match the brown tones anywhere else in the scene. And it's as bright or brighter than parts of the spider itself. It's a distraction. So I would go in there and burn down the highlights just in such a way that becomes less of a distraction. And also on the very top of the head, you can see some nice black hairs, and then there's kind of like a light gray kind of halo right on the top of the head. Whether or not that's legitimately real to the scene, I would go in there and again, burn down those highlights, just a simple quick edit so that that's less distracting and the focus stays on those hypnotic, creepy looking eyes.
You said everything that I've got pretty much. This is to me, as the type of shot that this is literally everything that I want in the photo. The dead center works, the leaf works, the coloring on the mouth parts. Those eyes are so magical, the way that you lit and captured those. And I wouldn't know how, which is why Don's knowledge is just so beneficial to everybody. The part on the left side of the frame behind him or her that's brighter, I want to add one last thing to that. I do agree that it needs to be burned down a little bit. I don't mind that it's brighter, right? I think it's too bright here, but I don't mind that it's brighter because it's accentuating the depth of the scene to me. So I wouldn't go too far with it myself. There's also a slight vignette on this, which I actually like. This is just really, it's very, very, very tastefully done.
There's something to be said.
Let me go back. Say again?
Just something to be said for how you focus on this. It can be difficult. These subjects are often moving. And when you get close enough to them, they are, not all the time, I mean, they all have their own characters, but sometimes they'll like jump onto your camera lens if you get too close. At least that's what I've had in my experience. So the fact that this spider is nicely framed, probably tame, and used to human interactions is always helpful in creating an image like that. All right.
I mean, this is going to sound weird. He's cute. So, okay. Next shot. This one is called Corner Speed 2. This one also shot on a Canon 7D at 500 millimeters. And it said in the notes, handheld. Now, I've shot handheld with a 400 2.8 Canon, never the 500. That's a heavy lens to do handheld and get a shot like this. There was no EXIF data that I saw. I tried expanding it, looking around. But this, to me, this may be the closest thing to what I shoot, which is high-speed action photography, which often the lighting is not something that you want. This is everything I want in a motorcycle shot. You've got the tire wall behind it that's blurred. The road is blurred. Really, the panning action here with a 500 millimeter handheld is stellar. Your choices for exposure are stellar. The wheel blur is perfect. It's not too much. I can see highlights on the tread area compared to the sidewall. I can read the fender stickers, the back wheel. I mean, the sticker that's on the back frame, right where it connects to the tire, I can read perfectly well. I can even see the brake parts perfectly well, and yet the spokes are blurry. Everything about this, including the composition, normally, I don't know that I would put this guy dead center. I'd have a little headroom in front of him, a little nose room. But the fact that starburst on the helmet is also dead center anchors it for me. And here's the other thing. Shooting this shot, perfect angle, because I can see Shoei on the front of the helmet. So now if you post this thing, you can tag it, and this would be a great ad for Shoei or for Castrol or for virtually any sticker that's on this bike. They could actually take this and use it as an ad. To me, I don't know what I would do to change this. Maybe a slight vignette to darken the corners. That's about it.
I don't even think the vignette would be useful. I think that this has to have a motion across the frame. I'm going to guess here that the image was in camera overexposed. And the reason why I say that is you have some white blobby areas around the frame, but pay attention to the back of the rider. The word Castrol. I can't see the C. I can see the Astral, but in the area around that, it looks like something has been burned down, but there was no information there to begin with. Right. And so maybe the original file has data there. I'd go back to the original if there is information there and recover that in a more natural way. Because if you try to apply those edits to something that's already at this state of processing, you've got nothing to recover. You just turn a white blob into a gray blob, and a gray blob is much more obvious to see.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And I should have seen that myself, and I didn't. The other thing is the fact that it is high key. Quite in a shot like this tends to mean they were trying to hide something by going high key. But I think the bottom line is the end result for me is extremely enjoyable to look at. Yep. All right. So next one, you get to go first.
All right. And it's out of my element and it's right into yours. So tell me how I'm going to do. So concert photography is something I've done very little of, but I do know the fundamentals of how to make something like this work. And I love the motion of the hair. I love the juxtaposition of the instruments on a sort of a perpendicular axis. They're meeting at almost a 90-degree angle with the main subject and then the supporting guitarist in behind. And so I kind of like that there's an interaction there and there's a light right in between them that normally I'd find distracting, but because of its location, I find to be useful. The fact that there's 3 plastic water bottles in the background, that kind of pulls me out of the element. The fact that there's like a disco ball thing on the floor that doesn't seem to be actively doing anything. I mean, there's some clutter in the frame that just doesn't need necessarily to be there. As the photographer, you can't really choose this. I mean, it's on the stage. So maybe I'm being nitpicky about that, but I'd pull the top down a little bit. You've got a diagonal line up in the upper right-hand corner that's not helpful, and it's pulling my eye away from the frame. And I don't know how much else I would do to this image. Aside from, maybe getting a tiny bit of additional motion blur in the hair. You've got some. And so it's not perfectly static, and you wouldn't expect it to be. But if you could have a tiny bit of additional blur, this was shot at 1/400th of a second, so maybe 1/200th of a second, might have introduced a little bit more that kind of gives a bit more flow to the frame. How'd I do, Steve?
I think you did really well. You picked up on a lot that I would have said. There's a couple things I would add here. First of all, the name of the image is Rock Icons Gig, and they actually put my first gig as official photographer. So first of all, to the maker of the shot, congratulations, man. You got your first gig as an official photographer for music. Warms my soul, to say the least. There's a couple of things on this that I'm having some issues with, and the first one is the crop. I understand what you were trying to do, probably, I'm assuming. And that is you were trying to keep the drummer, you were trying to keep the bass player in the background, and then you got the guitarist with the hair whip. I just don't think the square crop works because it puts the main subject dead center, but not dead center, right? His body's dead center, but the hair goes way close to the right-hand side. And I see the mic stand in the background, and it happens to be a white mic stand for the singer. I would have just preferred that the singer was in there too. Now, this was shot at 18 millimeters. So even at f3.5, your depth of field isn't enough to get separation between that main subject and the bass player in the background. I love that you included all the members. I always try and get a shot with multiple members in it, but they're too pronounced, especially where their positioning is, that I'm not sure subject-wise. I love that he's on the crate. The mirror ball thing on the floor, yeah, it's part of the show. It's going to be there. Nothing you can do. The 3 bottles, same thing. I hate water bottles on stage, but they're there. These guys need to drink. They put out a lot of sweat during a show. But the water bottles don't intersect the scarf hanging off of his back. And that, luck or otherwise, still makes it a better shot. That fabric comes down and wraps right around that bottle and keeps some clean lines there. In fact, you have very little bad intersection here. Even the guitar with the bass, like he said, is at that angle. The top crop, definitely pull it down. So if you look at the top left spotlight in the truss, it's separated from the other ones by a fair amount, and it stands on its own. I'd crop just below that so that the other lights tight it together.
Yeah, and a skilled editor could even edit those water bottles out if you knew cloning and healing tools like the back of your hand.
Yes, but here's the problem. This is photojournalism to an extent. So in music photography, we kind of span both worlds. If we're doing photojournalism, reporting on this show and telling the story of the show, there's a lot of music photographers who don't feel that way, and they'll clone stuff anyway. But if it is photojournalism and you want to treat it that way, which I tend to most of the time, then it's cropping, color correcting, and dodging and burning, and you don't clone anything out of an image. However,
if you are the official photographer, however, and this is something for portfolio work and it's not necessarily documentary, making people in the whole scene look their best, then I think that's the caveat that would allow this. But if you are a non-official photographer and you're just documenting the scene, that's where I would kind of draw the line.
Which is exactly what I was going to say. And that is, there's multiple ways that you can shoot a show. If you're shooting for photojournalism, you've got photojournalistic integrity issues to deal with. However, if you're shooting for the venue, which it sounds like you are here, it says my first gig as official photographer, that could be for the venue, right? Well, then those are marketing shots. Those are not journalistic shots. Do whatever they need to market the show. Or for that matter, if you're shooting for a record label, if you're shooting for management, if you're shooting for a local band themselves, they may not care about any of that. So like anything, you have to know what your outlet is and what your use model is, and then apply the rules that fit that specific use model. There is one tip I'm going to give you, and that is you shot this with a Nikon D3300 and a Nikkor 18-140. Now, that's an amazing spread on a lens. You could shoot a show with that one lens. However, it's a variable aperture lens. And get yourself into the point where you have fixed aperture lenses, 2.8, and your life is going to be a lot easier shooting shows like this. So other than that, yeah, really, really nice job. And I just love the music shots. All right, so next one. Next to the last shot, and this is going to be for Don. I take this one first, I guess. This is called The Guardians. And I'm going to start in a place that, from an image critique point of view, I love to start. I would print this. I would hang this on my wall. That's really to me. So no matter what gets said by me or Don after this, from a fine art point of view, this printed on metal or canvas and hung large 2 feet by 3 feet or 4 feet, whatever, I would put that on my wall in a minute. I love this image. There's a couple of interesting things. First of all, it's the rule of odds, right? I mean, there is one in the background, but you can't, or more than one in the background far back there, but you can't really see it.
That doesn't matter.
You see primarily 3. The front one, I love what you did with the focus. I do wish that the stem was in focus, not just the barrel seed pod, as it were. I'm guessing that's what it is. This isn't my world, so I sound like an idiot now. But I love the way the ones in the back fall off but mimic the shape. I love how close they are or not close to the edge. Even the one on the right, I think the one on the right in the background is a little too tight to the edge. A little bit more space on the right, I think, would be nice. But other than that, and the focus on the front stem, I wish that entire front one was kind of in focus, or at least most of it. The sticky things coming up behind it, I don't mind falling off. But other than that, I don't have a lot to add to this on what you could do better. I really like it.
It gets tricky because you have to balance two different things. You have to balance the amount that you have in focus in a single photograph, which also forces things out of focus, right? And I like the fact that you've got the main subject, seed pod of whatever flower, in the center of the frame, sharp, and then the ones in the background are softer. If I increased my depth of field to make the stem of the central subject, then the background would also get sharper. The only way around that would be, in this case, to use focus stacking, where you would it depends on how close you are to the subject, how big it is. Typically, I would physically rock forward and backward a little bit. You don't have to change your focus point by very much. Just by, probably a fourth or a half an inch, and take just a couple of shots moving forward and backward of the subject. And then that gives you the ability to bring that stem back in focus by even just manually doing this, taking that second frame in Photoshop.
So you agree, though, the stem being in focus would make it stronger?
The stem being in focus would be stronger, but you can't do it with a single shot, keeping everything else the same way. You would have to take a separate shot with that stem in focus and then composite that together. And I think that's one way that the image could have been improved. I like the fact that you have the rule of odds and that the spacing between the supportive elements in the background is not equal. However, I wish it might have been slightly more equal than it currently is. But that's just getting into the semantics of it. I agree with you, Steve. It's a good shot.
Yeah, you're right about the distance between them, the balance of the image. You don't want it too balanced. Now, if this was shot on a tripod, by the way, just take a plate shot of just the stem so that you can drop it in. It's not anything that's super hard. So let's jump to the last image. And for the last image, this one does not have an official title on Flickr, but it did say in the comments, Remembrance Day in Toronto. You want to go?
Yeah, this is the most innovative use of a shower cap I've ever seen. You can notice the person wearing a hat. I'm guessing these are emergency responders. I can see fire on at least one person's badge, and they all have the fancy dress hats that have the wide circular top on it. And somebody knew it was going to be snowing and put a shower cap on the top of it to protect their garment. And that is a novel approach. But the reason why I'm making a point of pointing that out is it's also distracting me from the main purpose of the image, which I'm seeing that as the most important in focus element of the frame is the innovative use of a shower cap. And I think that me saying that just kind of pulls me away from this entire idea of these emergency responders marching in this beautiful field of snow. I love the snow, and I love the way that everything is composed. You've got this beautiful trail of people, and I love the softness of it, but I would have just put something or somebody different in that bottom left-hand corner.
Well, and let's be fair, he probably couldn't say, could you switch with somebody else?
Well, no, but you could take the photo like 5 seconds later.
Yes, you could.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that they took a couple of photos from this position. So a couple of things. First of all, there's some interesting choices here. Doesn't this just feel like almost an old World War II soldiers marching image? The feel of it, the black and white treatment is so old fashioned that I dig it. Absolutely dig it. The crop is good. I like the vertical crop on this. I think you've got too much at the top. I don't need to see on the upper right-hand corner is another set of windows or the bottom corners of them. I don't need that. Crop below those windows so that the ground level windows are all that I see in the umbrella. Crop in between the two rows of windows, I think would tighten this image up a little bit.
You'd also remove the triangle up in the top corner as well as a visual element. Triangles really grab your attention. So crop just below that triangular element, and I think you're good.
Yeah, I completely agree. But the way that you positioned yourself, you got this curved leading line going through from the bottom left up to the right rule of third and off on the left rule of third. So great idea on composition, on positioning yourself. Your exposure, I love. See, to me, actually, my focus point is the hat in front of the shower cap with all the snow on it, because that shows how much snow there is. And that's also where the patch is that you can see that it's fire. Your exposure settings on this were fascinating to me. You wanted a very shallow depth of field. So you went 1.8. But to get that at 35 millimeters, you also went ISO 500 and 1/4000th of a second. And I'm curious what the real light was on this, because it must have been a lot brighter than it feels here. But you managed to not really blow out any highlights, not really muddy up or clip any blacks. I think that you did a really good job of this. There's just not a lot that personally I would add to it.
Yeah, I want to comment on that 1/4000th of a second as we wind down this episode. That's for the snow, because the snow is falling. And depending on, I'm something of a snowflake expert. These don't look like the really soft, fluttery ones. They're probably falling a little bit faster. And if you want to freeze the action of that to, instead of getting blurred lines, you'd have to be shooting at a very fast shutter speed, maybe 1/2000th of a second.
You could do that at 1,000.
Maybe 1/1000th of a second. But what I'm saying is, if you're going for the old-timey look, I mean, why not just go for the 1/4000th of a second? You can do it, and ISO 500 isn't going to destroy the shot. And so I would have made very similar choices in the camera settings for this image.
Again, there's so much about that image to absolutely love. Don, that's it, man. We made it through at a reasonable time this time around.
And we'll try to get even better with that as time goes on.
It's a work in progress. So before we go away, Don Komarechka, tell people where they can find you, where they can find the Photo Geek Weekly podcast, your book, and all of that.
So doncom.ca, donkom.ca is where you'll find my portfolio of work and links to social media stuff. Photo Geek Weekly, of course, at photogeekweekly.com, which we are about to resume from our Christmas hiatus. And that's where you can also find another podcast that I do called Inside the Lens, which I've got another couple of episodes coming up too. And I'm just going to tease that they're going to be awesome. So just stay tuned, follow me wherever you can. And I also want to say, if you enjoy these critiques, reach out to Steve and I either independently or comment on the posts or the video that we have posted, because we want that feedback, and that feedback helps make us make a better show for you to enjoy better as well. And so that feedback,
and in fact. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I love it. In fact, I go to the video to read those comments, and I'm not going to say I don't like the ones that just say good things. They're fine. I appreciate that. Please,
I like the ones that just say good things.
But I don't learn anything from that. I learn from the ones that tell me how we can improve. And so please critique us as well. That's my point.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And not only that, but some of the changes that Don and I have done on this show are specifically because of the comments that you've made. Some people say, do more images. Other people say do less images, but more detail. We're trying to find that balance point. And I think we got much closer on this particular show. But just to remind you, you can get your images into these photo critiques, or at least have a chance at it. Obviously, we can't do them all. There's hundreds of images in the group. But on Flickr, go join the Behind the Shot photo group on Flickr. Take your images, upload them to Flickr, and you have to do two things to get your images actually into the option for being in the show. Number one, you have to actually add them to the Behind the Shot group. Okay, that's key. Number two is you want to tag them BTS critique. It's all one word, and it's not a hashtag. So don't put the hashtag in the comment, for example. Flickr has a tagging system. If you go look at your image, there's a thing down at the bottom where you can click a button to say tag or add a tag, and add the tag BTS critique. If it's got both of those in there, when we go searching for images, we'll see it. We pick a selection of them and we get going. We're doing right now about one critique a month. That may increase. We don't know. It depends on how the show goes. And I've been practicing. Some of you got the email accidentally. I've been practicing doing some live streaming, trying to figure out my settings that are going to be good for live streaming. And of course, when that email went out, I got the email pop up in front of me and said, wait a minute, Behind the Shots live streaming. I thought I was private. I wasn't. So hopefully that'll be coming as well. But the critique shows are fun. You can find Behind the Shot at behindtheshot.tv. I'm Steve Brazill. Thanks again to my guest. As always, my co-host is a better way to word it, Don Komarechka. And to everybody, we'll see you on the next show.